Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to adjust and clean the contact breaker points on Matchless G3L WD.
I guess the first thing to address is why would you look at the contact breaker points in the first place? Well, I'd get in there and clean them about once every 2 weeks just to keep the bike running well. But in my case, the bike's just been a little bit slow to start of recent times. Now, like most owners of Matchless G3Ls, I've put a little mark with paint on the advanced retard lever, and that shows the ideal position for starting. And what I've noticed by playing around with it a little bit is that when she's difficult to start, sometimes she'll catch if I just advance the lever a little bit. Now, the ignition system on these bikes works via a magneto, and what a magneto does is it just spins a magnet close to a coil of wire which has got a current going through it. And this is where the contact breaker points come in, because when they open, that generates a massive surge in voltage as the magnetic field collapses. Now, my working theory is that my contact breaker points have just worked themselves too close together and the gap needs to be widened. And because they're starting close together, it's a little bit later when they open, and therefore I need to advance the advanced retard leader to make it work. Now, if I can set that gap correctly, then I think that the bike will work properly. What I've also noticed is that when I'm up at cruising speed at about 50 miles an hour, the bike just feels a bit hesitant and not as strong as she has before. And I think that's the same problem, but at the other end of the spectrum. In other words, that the ignition is not advanced enough when I've moved the lever over. So getting the contact breaker point gap correct is hopefully going to sort all of this out. If it doesn't, well, you'll see and you'll be able to take the mickey out of me, but I think it'll probably work. Adjusting the contact breaker points is something you can easily do at the side of the road, so-called gutter engineering, and that's why all the tools for it are already stowed in the toolbox on the side of the bike. My personal toolkit consists of a set of Whitworth spanners, a tool for adjusting the spokes, and then in this little zip carrier here, a pair of gloves, because removing a plug can be hot work, an adjustable spanner, a spare plug, a spare link for the chain, a pair of pliers, and a feeler gauge. And I've also got a little bit of very fine emery paper. Right, let's get the bike up to working height. First, we move aside the little clip and pull off the contact breaker cover. So here's the contact breaker point assembly, revealed having taken the cap off. And I've labelled it so that when I refer to it in the video, you'll find it a little bit easier to reference. So right in the middle of this, there's an axle, and the thing rotates clockwise as the wheel goes forward. If I start in the top right hand corner, the contact breaker points themselves, well, you've got the one on the bike side nearest the bike, and that's got a little lock nut and then an adjusting nut. The other breaker point is on the end of the spring, which you can also see labelled, and that isn't adjustable, it's just screwed into place. Moving to the bottom left, the contact breaker tab just serves as a bridge between the contact breaker main body and the spring. It just holds everything together. And then hidden away underneath the spring is a screw, and underneath that is a lubricating wick, and that's soaked with oil, and what it does is it just keeps everything lubricated, and you'll see more when I take things apart. So we'll start with the simplest jump of all, and that's just cleaning. So we take our little bit of emery paper, the finest one you can find, and using the coarse end, go underneath the spring between the two contact breaker points and give it a bit of a scrub. And then when you've done that, you just reverse the fold in the emery paper, so you're using the smooth side, and repeat this, and this is to make sure that there are no small particles left between the breaker points. And then it's a good idea to give it a good blow, or if you have an airline, use one of those. Now, if all you want to do is clean the points, then you're done at this stage and you can just put things back together. But if you want to adjust the contact breaker point gap, then the next stage is to remove the spark plug. Now, the only reason we're removing the spark plug is so that there's no compression in the engine, and we can turn everything over and get the contact breaker point assembly to rotate without the resistance of the compression being there. But as you're taking the plug off anyway, it's a good idea to give it a clean and inspect it for wear. Now the little electrode on the end of the spark plug is a bugger. It will always work itself loose, and if you lose it, you'll be in a world of hurt. They're difficult to get hold of. So I always tighten them up with pliers whenever I take the spark plug off. Now put the bike into gear. And now we have the ability to turn the contact breaker point assembly by rotating the rear wheel. Now at this point it's a good idea to go further into the assembly and to lubricate it. You don't have to, but it comes under the bracket of, well, why wouldn't you? It's only a 5-minute job. So we start by undoing the screw that secures the contact breaker spring. Then remove the spring by withdrawing it through the metal slot. Now we remove the screw that holds the lubricating wick. And the lubricating wick is actually inside the body of the screw. You can just see the little black circle at the end that shows you where it emerges. Now the last thing to undo is a small nut, about 7mm, and that holds the contact breaker body. That should come off along with the contact breaker tab, and now you can gently lever off the main body itself. And this gives me a good opportunity to show you how the advanced retard lever actually works. First we'll lubricate the wick, and we do this just by soaking it with a bit of common or garden machine oil. Next we'll pick up the main body, and inside there's a little black rod which is a tappet, and it's that which rides over the cam and pushes up and down on the spring and moves the contact breaker points apart. We need to remove this, clean it with a cloth and spray it with machine oil. And now we put everything back together by reversing the procedure we followed in the first place. Now to adjust the gap we need the correct size of feeler gauge. The manual says between 12 and 15 thousandths of an inch, so I'm going to plump for something almost in the middle, 13 thousandths. Now rotate the rear wheel until it moves the contact breaker points to the point where the gap is the widest. When I did it I found that it was in the 11 o'clock position, but it'll be different each time. Now with the gap at its widest, put the feeler gauge in and see how it feels. And it should be a sliding fit. In my case, with 13 thousandths of an inch selected, it's just a little bit too tight and I have to push it hard, which confirms what I suspected. The points have closed up a little bit and they need to be opened. So to make the adjustment, first we undo the lock nut, and that's the nut that's closest to the centre of the bike. And then to increase the gap, we screw the other nut clockwise, so it goes in towards the bike, and that increases the gap. And then tighten the lock nut again so everything stays in place. And then check and adjust the measurement as many times as you need to. This is a perfect sliding fit. And as I'm doing this in a workshop, not at the roadside, I'm going to finish off with some brake cleaner and some compressed air. Now we replace the cap and put the spark plug back in. Put the bike into neutral and replace your tools. Now the bike's completely cold, so a start first or second swing would be a really good result. Now I am really pleased with that. It starts well and it idles nicely at low revs. But to be sure, we've also got to find out what it's like at high revs, and specifically right up at cruising speed at 50 miles an hour. Well, that felt really good. But to be sure, we need to start it from warm as well, so I've tied this in with a quick trip to the shops. So there we have it, how to clean, adjust and lubricate the contact breaker points. If you've got any comments on the video or you know a better way of doing anything, then please do get in touch and I'll try and change it as soon as I can. In the meantime, thanks for watching and safe riding.